Hello, what I'd like to share with you today is a technique called tempera resist, um, where you can create great values and textures for your watercolor painting. And to do this, it's really four easy steps, which I'll show you. Um, just be sure you let it dry between each one. All right, so this is a technique in which we use tempera paint to create a resist. Um, and so we'll get different levels of um, contrast. And so this is the toughest part right here. Once you've drawn off your sketch, you have to decide where you want your different levels of uh, black, white, textured white, and textured gray. And so mark on your sheet, right on your painting, B for where you're going to put black tempera. This will give you a textured gray when you're done. W for where you want a textured white. This is where you'll be putting white tempera. Write in ink where you want a solid black, and this is where you're going to leave this blank until the last step. And then M for where you want to put the masking. And that masking will then give you a white when you're done, and you can go back in and add your color. So the first thing we're going to do is put masking on. I typically use the masking called Pebeo, P-E-B-E-O. Today I'm using a incredible white mask, just so you can see the contrast a little better. And this is a mask that had been recommended by Jean Grassdorf, so I don't hesitate to recommend it to you. And I just pour out a bit into a cup. Now, this tool is called a color shaping drawing tool. And this is what I use to apply mask. It's got a rubber tip, and it works beautifully. It's my favorite because once the mask dries on it, it just pulls right off with no trouble. If you prefer to mask with a brush, you can do that. Just be sure you don't use a brush that you love. And it needs to be a synthetic brush. And what you'd want to do is wet it and then rub it over a cake of soap, and then put it in your mask and apply the mask. But this color shaping tool is much easier. And so I'm just dipping this in the masking fluid and then barely touching the paper, just kind of laying that mask on. This will completely protect these areas. Put a little bit of masking on what will later be sparkle on the water. On the sparkle on the water, I was using an up and down motion. Um, that gives kind of a dotted effect that you can do with masking. Makes it a little more natural than the hard lines. So here we have the masking all done. And what you want to do is let it dry overnight at least. But you don't want to get it near late in the sun or any kind of hot area. So, and you can leave it a day or two if you want to. Now, this is tempera. You do need a high quality tempera. I've always used the brand Jazz, and you need to mix it really well before you use it. And this is one of my favorite tools. It's the chopstick. So first you order sushi, and then you collect everybody's chopsticks and use them for your art. So the tempera will be very, very thick in the bottom. So you want to be sure that that is well mixed. Now, when you mix the masking, as I just picked up, that is not stirred. That's just a gentle back and forth motion. But for the tempera, you really go at it. Again, I just pour some out. These are very handy little cups I get at a restaurant supply store. Doesn't matter what kind of brush you use on this, the tempera is not going to hurt your brush. So we want to apply a very thick coat of tempera. So now we go to the areas that we've marked with a W for the white tempera. And again, just dab it on. I mean, you want full coverage, but you want it very thick. And what happens is that as that dries, it will crack. And it's these cracks that are valuable to you, because that's where, when we do the final step of putting the ink on it, your ink will, some of it will seep through. We can just go over the area where we put the little bit of mask. You can go right over it with the white tempera, because when it comes out, it's going to give us a very light gray or almost white with a textured effect. So when you take off your little sparkles of mask, they will still show up. Want to let this dry again overnight, because it has to be thoroughly dry for this to work. Now I'm taking some black tempera, and same thing, and you can put all your tempera on during the same day. And this is going to give us a darker gray with still your textured look. So this is where we put B for black. You can see how important this value study is. And important to label everything, because you will never remember. So the next thing we're going to do is apply India ink. over the piece. And you want to be very careful handling your India ink, because whereas your tempera is going to wash off everything beautifully, that is not the case with India ink. So here we have the piece where we have now applied our masking, our white tempera, and if you look closely there, you can see how that's cracked, and then your black tempera. And we're leaving then the spaces that we want a solid, deep black. So for India ink, today I'm using Speedball India ink, which works fine. Also, it gives you a bit of a sheen. And then the other thing you can use is Dr. P.H. Martin, which is a little bit pricier, but gives a lovely matte. I had my best luck with actually taking the top off rather than trying to use the little flip up thing to pour it. And I just, again, put a little bit in a plastic cup. And to apply the India ink, I use a sponge. This is just, you can see here, the P.H. Martin, Dr. P.H. Martin matte black India ink. Which does give a nice finish. Apply the India ink. I use a sponge brush, and again, just pick up some India ink and just glide right over everything. So we're putting it over the white tempera. Don't need to put it over the masking, of course, but it won't hurt it because that masking is protecting underneath. Again, you're putting generous amounts of ink over this tempera. And what it will do is sink down into the crevices and cracks that you've got there. And it sinks down in an overall way too, to give a little bit of texture, a little bit of color, but mostly it's coming through on where the tempera is cracked. And then you can see I'm applying the India ink also on the section below it. We had labeled that section ink, and that will give us just a black finish. And then as we go down, I'm putting the India ink over the black tempera. So the black tempera itself is going to tone your paper a little bit and give it a gray tone. And then this black India ink is going to seep through and give you the texture that you're after. The support I'm using, if you're not familiar with it, is a well-used piece of gator board. It's like a very thick foam core, but it's wonderful, so lightweight. It makes a wonderful support for your watercolor paper. And also you can put your piece between two pieces of gator board, spray the back of your painting and put it between two pieces of gator board and pile all your art books on it. And if you get any wrinkles in the paper, that'll take care of it. Now in this demonstration, I'm using 300-pound arches, which I do love that paper, but this will work equally well on 140. You just may have to flatten it afterwards. Okay, so we would have just come on down and put the black over the rest of that piece. Just saving some of that ink, pouring it back, because we never throw anything away, do we? And also I would have knocked it over, so there you go. So here is our gorgeous painting so far. You can see the top is the masking, and the whole bottom is now covered with India ink, and everything on this piece is dry. So again, you've let the India ink dry at least overnight. So the next part is actually the most fun. Today we're using a plastic bin. What we're going to do is wash off the tempera. Now, when you're at home, I just put this directly in the shower. So that's what's really fun, throwing your painting in the shower. Today we'll see how well squirt bottles do. Can't quite get exactly the same level of pressure. This is Libet Jones, who taught me this technique, helping me with squirting water. You can see it's starting to come off there. This is just a regular kitchen sponge, not having been used for anything in the kitchen. And you can gently rub your painting. This is a little more difficult than it typically is in the shower. You get more pressure, but also I believe I let this sample sit overnight in a hot car. So that shows you that you don't want to do that. But you can see this start to come off. So this is where we're not doing anything on the masking part at this point. We're just taking the tempera off. This is where we put the white tempera and covered it with India ink. And you can see it gradually starting to come off there. The little pieces of white that you see are where we put the light masking, mask those sections, the lines. It's lines in the highway. This is a painting of scene going over the top of the Skyway Bridge, if you're familiar with that. So like Dali liked to put grasshoppers in his paintings because he was afraid of grasshoppers. Well, I am not fond of bridges. So I like showing coming over the other side. Okay, so now this is what it looks like. So you can see where the white masking was up top, and then the larger triangle square, can't see it as well in this painting, but it is a darker gray right there. So it's a gray with a bit of a texture there. And then the India ink gives us, in this case, sort of an abstract design to this painting. So this is a technique for people who love high contrast. And the masking then is still on the painting at this point. So I use what's called a rubber cement pickup to take the masking off. And okay, so you can see there, there's some highway lines coming up there. And the masking comes off quite easily with the rubber cement pickup. So here's the print of the finished piece. So you can see that where we left the white sparkle on the water and then painted in the water and painted in the sky. Now there's also, and I mean, it might seem logical to use it on pavement or use this technique for walls and that kind of thing. So I'd like to show you a variety of paintings that I've done using this technique. This is the final one, and this you wouldn't typically think of using it for a portrait, but again, I found it worked quite well. So this technique is used in the entire piece. It's most obvious in the background, but if you look closely, you can see that it is also used in the face itself and in his uniform, in the child's hair as well. Well, thank you very much for coming. I really enjoyed doing this for you. If you have any questions, you are so welcome to contact me. My email is swindal@gmail.com. Again, thank you.